Thank you all for coming and joining us at the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks-Herenstein Center for Values and Leadership at Yeshiva University. We're always proud before holidays to put on shiurim, put on classes and seminars and workshops. We'll have one on meaning how to make your Seder more meaningful, closer to Passover. Of course, now we're approaching Purim. We're basically a week away. Usually I go into a holiday and I say, I'm totally not ready. But actually, I think there's been so much anti-Semitism. I feel, unfortunately, too ready for Esther. To hear the words of perhaps the first recorded anti-Semitism that we have, millennia old, the verse of 3:8, where Haman makes his decree about the nature of the Jewish people as he observes them, and the fact that as a result, they don't deserve to live. I imagine that many of us have been paying attention to the news, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Candace Owens of the world, the Nick Fuentes of the world, and feeling that this Haman's echo, Haman's echo in the news, and thinking, does this ever go away? So tonight I want to talk about Jewish identity as another framing for Esther, because of course Esther is a book that starts off with a lot of hate and ends with a lot of love. And that's really the happy ending that we're all after. And so I wanted to think a little bit along something that Rabbi Sacks said that reverberates for me in my teaching and in my life. And that is non-Jews respect Jews who respect Judaism. And what I want to talk about is the way in which Mordechai and Esther respected their faith, and as a result, were able to bring everyone along in that respect. But of course, it's going to take a while to get there. There are things that are going to happen beforehand, and I am going to share my screen. Okay, we're going to look together. As many of you have learned with me, know I love looking at a piece of art, and this is a fabulous piece of art. Let's take a big look at it. This is from Edward Armitage, who was an English painter. He was the oldest of seven children. He lived in the 19th century, died in 1896, and he painted this painting, or he completed this painting called The Festival of Esther in 1865, which hangs at the Royal Academy of Art in London. And you can go on a field trip and say, Erica sent you. This is a fantastic painting. And The Festival of Esther is not, I think, a title we would have given this painting. So I'm inviting you to, if you would like, to cascade in the chat alternate titles for this painting. There was nothing, when I read this story and I read this particular scene, the word festival just doesn't come up in my brain. We might understand why the artist painted it. So let's look at what's in this painting, because it's very, very detailed. And the artist gives us so many different places to look at. So feel free to unmute yourself and tell me something that you're noticing.
Could I go?
Please.
All right. Hi, it's Ann.
Hi,
So I think the guy in the yellow hat or keffiyeh, whatever he's wearing, is begging at Esther's feet.
Ann.
I think he's being held back by, I'm gonna guess Harvona. I don't know, but it's interesting. He has a different skin tone than everybody else. So he's probably a servant, because that would be the language of skin tones of the time of the painter.
Mhm.
Somebody's missing a shirt. Esther's holding somebody back with her hand. I'm assuming that's Esther that he's begging at her feet, since we know this
Mhm.
is a Esther story. So I don't know who she's gesturing to hold on a second. And I guess the guy up there in the crown and the red would be Ahasuerus, who's doing a "I'm very powerful" sign.
Yeah, I'm very powerful. And if you look, there's a lot of strong arms here. There's a lot of muscle here. In Ahasuerus's arm, the way that we communicate stories and paintings is often through the arm, the hand, the face, the foot. Here, the arms are very powerful, and you almost get a sense that you're seeing the exact arm length of Haman, as you are of Achashverosh, but one is in petition and one is with a threat. Now, what's so fascinating is Esther is here in white. She's very angelic looking, but she's also in a very active pose. She's not sitting in repose. Her foot is activated. She understands that there's a threatening scene here, and maybe she's ready to pounce or to move. With one hand, she seems to be holding back the figure in the background, who I'm going to suggest is Mordecai, in some way, perhaps signaling, I got this, Uncle Mordecai. You raised me well, and I know how to rise to the occasion of this moment. Um, Haman is in a petitionary pose. That's straight out of the text. If you look, he approaches her when she's on her couch, which has all kinds of erotic connotations, and that's certainly the way Achashverosh reads this. That he is not begging for his life, but he's physically, sexually assaulting or harassing the queen, and so Achashverosh is dressed in the red of anger. It's interesting, someone is holding up what looks like a fancy patterned talit, but perhaps trying to break Achashverosh's anger by hiding Haman. These might be people who are or ministers who are trying to protect Haman and separate them because they know what's coming. If you
Is
look
it
at just,
unusual that his arm is on her, looks like on her body? To,
yes,
I mean, you don't just touch the
you
queen.
do not just touch the queen. You do
So
not just touch her. And I'm sorry, Paul, that you weren't around to tell Haman, don't touch the queen. All right. So, you can understand that Achashverosh, she's in a very vulnerable position. And Achashverosh, what Achashverosh sees, he's already seen Haman in the middle of the night in his chamber, walking around, wanting his wanting to be driven in a addressed in a horse and in a chariot with everyone bowing to him. As he already sees Haman's megalomania, so that stops at nothing, and it will not stop at Esther. And the king becomes very protective of her. And this is one of the great ironies of the book: is that Haman does great injustice, and when he dies, injustice is done to him. Now, he's killed for a sin that he didn't actually commit, which is for trying to proposition the queen. That wasn't his intention. He knew that his time was over. There are a few things I just want to point out in the painting before we go to the text. And that is, you can see that the floor, there's this elaborate tile, then there's this elaborate carpet. And you see that the carpet is overturned in the right corner. And then there's a goblet that's overturned. These are ways in which the artist is very subtly suggesting that there's going to be some kind of reversal or turn. So the cup isn't facing the right way, the cup is overturned, the rug is not facing the right way. And then there's, of course, on the left-hand side, there's this beautiful sky that we don't see while we're inside. But along that wall, that left wall, is a spear. So when you think there's a way out, maybe Haman could have run out. There's a spear there. He's absolutely trapped. So we're gonna take this image, and we're gonna talk a little bit about how this is a turning point moment in in Esther's ability to talk about who and where she's from. So we're gonna talk about Jewish pride. Wait, hold on a second.
Excuse me, Dr. Brown. I just want to say a couple of people
Yeah.
are putting comments into the chat in case you're able to see.
I can't read them while I'm actually. Let me see.
Okay.
Oh, maybe I can. Okay, War Chariot is called Haman exposed. Beautiful, unique closed captions. War Chariot is carved on the back wall. The cloth is about to be used to cover Haman's face. Yes, thank you. Both Esther and Mordecai are shaped in implied triangles, which is an artistic way to show that they're stable, grounded figures of the composition. Beautiful. Okay, lovely. Sarah, nice to see you. So let's just talk about Jewish pride. Mordecai would neither kneel nor bow down, says Rabbi Sacks. The Jewish people do not bow down to any pressure, especially the Jewish people in Israel. And he will lead us, God will lead us upright to our land. Because of Israel, because of Israel, because of your strength, because of your refusal to be intimidated, every Jew walks a little taller today. So if you ask me what this class is really about, is the way that Purim helps us walk a little taller as Jews today. and a reminder that in any period of history in which we have lived, there are times when we have been cast down, when we're forced to crouch, and when we emerge walking a little taller. And just something to think about this week as we in the lead up to Purim, every morning as part of our brachot, our series of blessings, we say zakuf kafim. We bless God and thank God for the ability to stand tall, right? We were bent down, but now we can stand tall. And maybe we'll think about that not only physically as the way that we, get up and prepare for the day, but existentially and emotionally, what it means to walk as a Jew when you need to walk taller. And that was Rabbi Sacks on what lessons can we learn from the story of Purim. And certainly, this was a talk that he gave in Sderot in 2008. Imagine, in 2008, Rabbi Sacks advised the people of Sderot to walk a little taller. Who knows what he would have thought had he been around for October 7th, 2023. So let's talk about the Jewish people. This is not a book that places a high there's not high Torah content in the traditional sense. God does not appear, or God is not named, rather, but alluded to in so many different places. What does seem to be very central as a dominant theme is peoplehood. Now, many, many years ago, around the 2007, 2008, 2009, the talk in the world of federations and established Jewish organizations was peoplehood. What is Jewish peoplehood? And so myself and a colleague of mine, Dr. Misha Galperin, co-wrote a book called The Case for Jewish Peoplehood, trying to understand how this term is used and what it actually means. Sometimes it means we're in connection, or we see someone who's Jewish across the room, and we feel some degree of safety, or we feel that we matter to someone, or the car breaks down. And this literally happened to me last week. Someone saw my mezuzah who was walking outside. She felt quite sick, and she asked me, could she come in and have a glass of water, right? So there are signals that we give to each other as members of this psychic family. People bagel each other all the time, right? Oh, you're Jewish because you're wearing something that is outwardly Jewish, and that says to me that you're not uncomfortable with your being Jewish, so I'm not going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to. And there's all these great stories of people who meet each other because of this kind of connection. And it's not only being part of an extended family. And that's why in our definition, it's a family with a purpose. There might be many members of your family who are, we'll call the difference between essential and accidental in philosophy, that someone happens to be a member of your family, but you don't really have a relationship with that person. This is different. This is really an intentional relationship with this family. And sometimes that comes through joy and shared history and shared values. And sometimes that comes, as we've seen, unity that emerges out of persecution and oppression. So I want to share other definitions around that same time period. I'm not really sure why this happened at this time. I'm not really sure why it became a word that a lot of people were using. Now it's really not a word that's so much in fashion. But I think it is a helpful word to use in thinking about the Megillat Esther. The notion of a Jewish people, this is by Alan Hoffman and Susan Barron, two friends and colleagues, something larger than individual existence, gives many Jews a sense of connectedness to a bigger something, which is especially important as collective bonds weaken in the general society and also amongst Jews. But a danger lurks if this becomes a diluted, lowest common denominator concept, not nearly as powerful or robust as Jewish religious identity or national identity. So, and I say that because what was joining Jewish people for a while is just Jewish food. Now, I like Jewish food, not all Jewish food, but I like Jewish food. But that doesn't create, and that deepens my relationship to my people, is to know the foods that we eat, the foods that we cook, the recipes that we share. But that's not a very strong connection. Maybe it's stronger for some than others. And what Hoffman and Barron point to is there's got to be something more transcendent, that more demanding of us, that connects us to something bigger, because it can't, if being Jewish is simply a label or a feeling or an affinity for socializing with Jews, that's not actually going to be powerful or robust or last for a long time. And so we'll think about that as we open the Megillah. Where were Jews at the beginning of the Megillah, and where were they at the end of the Megillah? Jonathan Ariel also wrote in the Peoplehood Papers, which have been around. I think I don't know if they still exist, but they were published every year. People would publish in this collection, the Peoplehood Papers. And Johnny Ariel says Jewish peoplehood is a shifting, evolving, dynamic sense that the sum total of the different parts is greater than its aggregate components. It sees a family resemblance between certain siblings or cousins, even distant ones, rather than looking all the time for identical twins. Now, I love that image, and I love the way that Johnny wrote about it. This idea of a family resemblance. So it's not you're not identical twins, but somehow you meet a Jew from Ethiopia, or you meet a Jew in the former Soviet Union, or you meet a Jew in Australia, or a Jew in Italy, or a Jew in Iceland, and there's some sense that I see myself in you, even if we don't really know each other, and but we don't have to be identical twins in order for that to take place. It posits that you can make a claim on each other at a time of need, and that you have the potential for a different kind of conversation with each other than you do with non-Jews. One that is, at turns, warmer, livelier, more heated, more aggressive, and more intimate about Jews and the meaning of life. Anyone want to share some thoughts about these definitions of peoplehood? I'm happy to put
Um,
them back.
Yep. I
yeah,
Please.
Paul Kerbel. I also think people is very religious because when I think about Shabbat or I think about prayer or when I think about a holiday, the fact that people around the world are doing the same thing I am is very powerful to me. So
Mm.
I do view peoplehood not just as like a sociological thing, but it's really who we are.
Yeah, it's something that we feel. But again, it's an interesting question. If you take away all ritual observance, if you take away language, right? So we don't have a shared language. Um, what is left, right? And I think that's
And
what many of these writers were trying to do, as was I, is trying to understand, could you strip Judaism of everything and still have a sense of Jewish peoplehood, or would it be very short-lived, which is what I believe. It would be very short-lived if you stripped it of everything. It would lose it. An identity is important when it's robust, when it demands something of us, and it also gives us comfort and associations, right? If someone says, I am 1/8 Irish, but being Irish doesn't mean anything to me. So it's not really a marker of anything. Someone else wanted to jump in?
I can walk into any shul and feel like I'm home.
Yes, Sadie, you can walk into any shul and feel like you're home.
It's also
Um,
going back in time. It's not just contemporaneous. You have a link to people before you,
yeah.
and text before you, and books before you, and
Yeah, beautifully said. But also that connection is also it's vertical and horizontal. I always say it's like next the people around you and the people before you and the people who come after you. There's some kind of linkages there that are very powerful. And what I want to highlight in the Book of Esther is that I think the peoplehood equation wasn't strong in the beginning of the book. And one of the proofs that it was weak is that Mordechai is identified as the Ish Yehudi, Haya b'Shushan Habira. There was the Jew in the capital city of Shushan. I imagine that there were other Jews there. And of course, his lineage is discussed, the fact that he was in exile. When you introduce yourself as an exile or you're introduced as an exile, it means I really don't belong here. I'm not of this place. When you meet me, you must know this about me, that I am not of this place. And so he introduces himself that way, and you're wondering, where are the other Jews here? We don't really get a sense of them until chapter 4. So I'm going to go back to the share. We are now going to we're going to look at a text that is the progenitor for the book of Esther, and that is Yosef. We're going to talk about some watershed moments that have to happen in order for people to own their Jewish identity, which is true today and it was true then. So There are a lot of parallels between the story of Yosef and the story of Esther. I imagine that you've heard this somewhere along the road. I like to look at it in the text itself. There's the search for a wise person. Paro says, who we need, someone we find another like him, a man in whom is the Spirit of God, right? A chacham kamocha. And Pharaoh said, God has made all this known to you. In other words, you must be destined for greatness because God has made these dreams a mechanism for understanding. You're a discerning person. So he's given a power, and right, he's put in charge of the land of Egypt, very similar to the mandate that Mordechai will receive when they're successful. And he removes his signet ring, so that tabat, we know that v'yasar paro et tabato me'al yado v'yiteno to al yad Yosef. We know that a signet ring is important. It's given from Pharaoh, from Achashverosh to Haman, and then Achashverosh transfers it to Mordechai after Haman's descent. So there's the signet ring appears here. He had him dressed in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain upon his neck. In the apocryphal Esther, Esther also has a set of clothing that she wears in the royal household, in the royal chambers, and then returns to her regular, let's say, Jewish clothing that's not royal and aristocratic when she goes back to her home. So this dance between the clothing and what the clothing represents, certainly when Mordechai comes out and Mordechai is so finely dressed, we all pause in shul to note the clothing that he wears. He has achieved a certain something, a certain statesmanship that needs to be noted. And of course, then there's he's taken out in a chariot, which is chapter 6 of Esther. They cry before him, abrek. So this idea of promoting someone via chariot so that everyone knows the royal associations of the two of them. Paro gave Yosef a new name, Tzafra Paneach. He gave him a wife. He was put in the land in charge of the land of Egypt, and he was 30 years old. Now, we don't know how old Esther is. We assume that she's younger than 30, but they are young. These two are young, but there's something magical about both of them that give them these external accoutrements, which are really if you like, trinkets for the real reason they were chosen, which is there's something very wise about each of them. And here's similarities between the Joseph and Esther and Mordechai narratives. Esther and Mordechai can sometimes be one character, so to speak, in terms of this literature, because things happen to Esther and to Mordechai that happened to Joseph. So here you can have some textual similarities to explore. And then I wanted to show you, this is from the Book of Esther, Motifs, Themes, and Structure by Sandra Beth Berg. And she says, both tales are set at the court of a foreign monarch and concern Jewish heroes who rise to prominence at those courts. The heroes suffer a decline in their personal fortunes as a direct result of their positions at court. The heroes, however, overcome their misfortunes, and their success provides the means by which their people are saved. In addition, each story refers to two eunuchs who act against the king. These incidents involving the eunuchs both come to the king's attention and contribute to a reversal in the personal fortunes of the Israelite servants. This turning point directly results from the king's disturbed sleep when the monarch remembers the Israelites. Now, we tend not to think about the fact that Pharaoh slept and was disturbed in his sleep, and that propelled that story. Where here we introduce Mordechai. Mordechai is introduced and Esther are introduced before the king has difficulty sleeping. But the fact that he has difficulty sleeping will begin or will set the terms for the next plot development. In both stories, the heroes eventually are rewarded for their service to the king by the transference of royal power to them. Both accounts also depict a banquet scene where invited guests do not know the true identity of their host or hostess. The revelation of Joseph's and Esther's true identities results in a change in the personal lives and fates of their guests. Finally, both stories mention punishment by hanging. So there are a lot of similarities in this story. And one could understand that the author of Esther would have looked at the Joseph story and seen this idea of a Jew who's reached some of the highest echelons in a royal household and say and develop a sort of a parallel story that has its roots in an earlier story. And Daniel, we're going to throw Daniel in there because, of course, Daniel is the other important courtier text that we have in Tanakh. They're given new names, just as Esther has two names, Yosef has two names. Daniel also is given two names. Daniel is with a young group of Jewish young nobles, and Daniel does something which Mordechai, Esther, and Yosef do not do. He actually asked permission not to eat the king's food or drink the king's wine. He did not want to defile himself. And as a result, God made sure that those in charge of Daniel gave him the food that he was prepared to eat. I fear that my lord the king, if you can see right here, who allotted food and drink to you, will notice that you look out of sorts, unlike the other youths of your age, and you'll put my life in jeopardy with the king. So this is a really fascinating conversation. Daniel says, listen, do me a favor. While you're having the filet mignon, just hand me some legumes. Give me some edamame. I'm going to be sitting at the side. I'm going to be totally fine. Don't worry about me. And the chief officer says, if you don't have all this protein and you're not really full, you're going to look bad. And if you look bad, then the king will think I'm not taking care of you. So I can't do this. And then Daniel and his crew say, please test your servants for 10 days, giving us legumes and water to drink. In other words, you know what? We appreciate your concern. And as we negotiate this together, let's have let's just do an experiment, right? Let's empirically decide if this is true or not true. And he agreed to this plan and tested them for 10 days. When the 10 days were over, of course, they looked better and healthier than all the youths who were eating of the king's food. It's like sort of going to some retreat complex where they give you health food for 10 days and you come out, you're looking fantastic. But the point here, which I think is so fascinating in this negotiation with power, is that Daniel actually wants to maintain his Jewishness in a foreign court in ways that Esther and Mordecai and Yosef sort of they take that foreign name and then they conceal a lot of their identity. Now there'll come a time when it's time to reveal that identity, but there's maybe it's a youthful naivete that Daniel has right away to venture to people with power saying, can we make a secret negotiation? Will you respect me if I need to do something? Will you help me? Will you help accommodate me? And if you help accommodate me, I will also help you. And I'll make sure that we can live in this conciliant relationship and both of us will benefit and neither of us will suffer. And I say that because I think that as Jews in general society, sometimes we do have to negotiate things. So if, for example, you go to work, it's something that often I'm asked by students, what do I say about my Shabbat observance? Or I'm starting a new graduate school and I'm going to be gone for so many days in the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah. How do I tell someone, what if I lose my job before I even start my job? And we understand these kind of tensions. And I imagine some people on the screen have been through this themselves. And we're often respected because those days and those times are sacrosanct to us. But if we start playing around, we say, oh, I need special kosher food, but then we eat the other food as well. Then people feel they're being taken advantage of. So whenever you make a faith proposition in the public, you have to also own it and not contradict it and make sure that people see you not only as someone who keeps kosher, but someone who lives a life of kashrut, right? Lives and answers to a high standard. So all of these texts ask us, is dual loyalty possible? And they really get to the heart of what peoplehood is. what does it mean to represent your people when you're far away from your people in a secular court, or not a secular court here, but a royal, be a, not secular, but it would be an aristocratic non-Jewish court. What is demanded of us, and what can we do to maintain the connections? Lee Humphreys says in his discussion of this, court legends offer a response to ethnic competition and a rather benign response to inequities and restrictions on social mobility. They promulgate a wisdom teaching to the effect that the person marked by wisdom receives the just reward, even in pagan society. They affirm a theology of weakness and also a psychology of weakness. That is, they provide a wish fulfillment of a scribal ideal of wisdom and righteousness. And I love the way that Humphreys says this, because what he's saying is, if you're truly a wise person, doors will open to you, even in societies that are very, very far away from your society. But if you don't do that, right, if there's some injustice, it will cost a lot more. And I think we're seeing some of that now. Unfortunately, people with very Jewish names are appearing on the front page of newspapers all the time, um, uh, for really illicit and revolting behaviors. And we sometimes feel, and that's the downside of peoplehood, is you're pulling me down when I had nothing to do with this. But when we can pull people up, we want to take the credit. So it's a really delicate relationship. John Collins, talks about the contests that take place in these courtier stories. The tale may emphasize the wisdom or ability of the courtier, in this case, the crisis which provides the setting and the specific nature of the message or action of the courtier are of secondary importance, right? So there's a crisis that's playing out in the background, but what's playing out in the foreground is the ability, the wisdom, the competence of a particular person. So all of the crises that are happening behind the scenes in Pharaoh's land in Egypt, where there's days of plenty, years of plenty, and years of famine. Joseph is seen as the one who can negotiate this difficult landscape. The highlight is almost like the spotlight is on him. The tale may focus on the drama of danger or humiliation followed by salvation. The wise man is for some reason threatened or imprisoned. However, he's eventually released and exalted more greatly than before. This type of story can serve to highlight the wisdom or skill of the courtier, but can also focus on the dramatic manner in which his fate is reversed. So all of our courtier stories in Tanakh have this dimension too, which is that the wisdom that is originally demonstrated is somehow thwarted, and the last act will be an act of salvation. But we're in suspense. When Joseph rises up in Potiphar's home, we're just cheering for him. And then we see that he's put himself a little bit too much in the spotlight. He's Potiphar's wife grabs a piece of his clothing, and he goes to prison. And so we're not sure what's going to happen to him. Wisdom will end up saving him, but wisdom also brings attention to him that will, before it saves him, it will hurt him. And in the story of Esther, that happens between chapters 2 and 3. Mordecai is able, because he's at the Shar HaMelech, the gate of the king, he's able to hear a plot to assassinate the king, and he's able to thwart that plot. And then what does it say in the very next verse? 3:1. There are three different verbs that are used to suggest Haman's promotion. And you're going, what? Who is this guy? Mordecai here just saved you, and you just totally ignored him. And so Mordecai now begins a sort of tumble where he doesn't bow to Haman. He's confused because he was not rewarded at all. That will get backtracked when the king reads the Chronicles in chapter 6, when he can't sleep, and then he discovers, oh my gosh, like we never rewarded Mordecai. But Mordecai goes through that same sort of experience of despair and distrust and unsurety before he rises. And see, the tale may be used as a vehicle for the message of the courtier. The message may be cast in the form of proverbial sayings or the interpretation of dreams. There's something that each of these individuals understands that supersedes the norm, or I'll say that lives in the realm of otherness. So in Joseph's and Joseph's stories, it's that Joseph is a dream interpreter. He lives in part in the subconscious. There are people who are good at interpreting dreams because they pay very careful attention to other people and to themselves. So they're thinking to themselves, how am I processing a trauma or an event or a world event or a personal thing? How am I processing this and what might be the outcome of this? In the Esther story, when Esther is taken, brutally taken to this pageant, and all the women are given things to to ornament themselves, decorate themselves, and make themselves more impressive. She takes nothing. And what Achashverosh falls in love with is the chen v'chesed. There's something about her, this guilelessness, this graciousness that she has, that is that transcends all of the material. There's something ephemeral, and that overcomes all the material, excessive, sexual licentiousness. There's something about her that stands out. So that appears in all of these tales. Let's talk about the destiny moment. Any questions, by the way? I've been talking for way too long. I'm going to stop the share for a minute so we can process together. Thoughts? You're putting on your Esther, your inner Esther. No, I'm not used to everyone being so quiet.
Who has the dreams? Only Ahasuerus, right? Not Esther.
Right. Well, actually, in there's no dreamscape in the Book of Esther. There are dreams, however, in the Ahasuerus does dream in the apocryphal story of Esther. So there are dreams there. Esther doesn't deal with dreams, but there's something appealing about her that transcends the way in which all the other women appear. So remember, you're in a court and you need advisors, you need queens and advisors and courtiers, and some of them you inherit, and some of them you like talent spot, right? You see someone and they stand out for some reason, but it's very hard to articulate what it is about them that's very special. They have some kind of presence, which is what I think Esther had in these stories. Other thoughts?
Yeah, something that just came up for me was when we were talking about peoplehood before. What I was thinking was it's when you can kind of feel what someone else is going through in a way
Mm,
that other people can't. So, like something that comes to mind a lot is um, like when a lot of young women were taken a few years ago, like everyone came out and was like, oh, we need to
mm,
get these girls back. But it came more from like a place of this is the right thing to do, not
mm,
I am in pain because my girls are missing.
mm.
Whereas with the hostages, it wasn't just like, oh, we need to get the hostages back. It was we need to get our brothers and our sisters back. And we really felt it, even though we didn't know them. And
Yeah,
then you compare that, I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but you compare that with the Purim story, and you have Mordecai tell Esther, like, don't think that you're separate from everyone. Like, you're a
right.
part of this.
Yeah,
Like, it will come back to you. And then she goes and she fasts. Like, she inflicts that pain on herself.
yeah.
So I don't know why that just came to me now when we spoke about peoplehood before, but to me, that's also a story that kind of gets woven together through
Yeah,
Megillah as well.
yeah. Thank you, Shana, for that beautiful insight. And you're moving in the direction that I was moving in, so I'm glad that you got there first, because I think that there was this sort of pain that this very very deep, profound pain that manifests itself as unity, the generosity that came out in the first months after the war, things that we really couldn't expect after all the protests around judicial reform. There were these moments when you said, "Oh, I recognize this feeling. This is such a remarkable feeling that we're all moving together and working together, and that kindness is the currency." Of course, that doesn't last for a long time, but what did last was the feeling that the hostage crisis these were our siblings, these were our sisters and brothers, as you so beautifully said, Shana. These are our people, and we can't afford to lose even one of them. And we will dig up hundreds of graves just to find that one non-living hostage and bring that hostage back, because there's a bond here. And in fact, I think much of the work that we do, that we did in those months and months, was to try to convince the world to see the hostages the way that we saw them. But it's very hard when you don't see someone as family, or you complicate it with certain politics. You don't see the humanity in it. I had the great good fortune of taking a group of students and faculty, and joined by Terry and Andrew Herenstein, to Rome. And we met the Israeli ambassador to the Holy See, and one of our students had the opportunity to interview him. And he said that his agenda pre-October 7th and post-October 7th was totally different. He was appealing to the Pope's humanity to be a voice for hostage release. That was his agenda. So it's almost like everyone is focused on a certain goal, and that goal brought people together in a way that was very profound. I'm going to go back to the share, but please, if you have anything that you want to add,
If I can, sorry, just
please.
to add to that,
I
yesterday,
just
uh, sorry, yesterday at the Yom Yun, Matan, like so beautifully, when
Mm,
he was talking about like what helped him or what
mm,
is helping him in his process of healing and what we can all do for him. He
mm,
basically said, like, we have to remember that what makes the Jewish people so special is that unity.
mm,
And he said, like, at one point he had access to a TV in one of the tunnels. And more than anything, just seeing all of the people in Israel come together and knowing that he
mm.
wasn't forgotten, like, that was huge for him. And he really
Huge.
just kept coming back to this idea of, like, this is special. So it was
Yeah.
just interesting that you bring that up as well.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, like, you don't even realize that the whole world is crying for you, and the whole world is rooting for you. I was very involved in the Soviet Jewry movement as a high school and college student and post-college. And I remember I went to the former Soviet Union before Glasnost, and I remember asking someone how they coped with their situation. And he said to me, we're the lucky ones, right? We're the lucky ones, prisoners of Zion, because we know that there are people who are strangers to us, but also family to us, who are sending us things and caring for us and making plans for us to leave. He said, "What about everybody else here? They don't have any of that." And it was a real turn of perspective for me to understand, what does it feel like to be carried by thousands of strangers you have never met who love you. It's very powerful. Wendy.
sorry, I just had a basic question, having not read the apocryphal Esther. What is Mordecai's dream?
It's Ahasuerus's dream, and there's a dream interpretation scene. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not in my library right now. Otherwise, I would read it to you. But you can actually get it online.
Okay, I'll
And
do that.
dreams also come up in the Daniel story, and in a more, we'll say it, a more vicious way, actually, than they appear in the Joseph story, where a dream interpreter is needed. If a dream interpreter did not get the dream right, and how do you know if you got a dream interpretation right? That person would be killed, and Daniel is able to interpret the dream. So, dream interpretation, which occupies a lot of the ninth chapter of Talmud tractate of Brachot, a dream interpretation was seen as a very discerning form of wisdom. In other words, because you understand things beneath the surface, way beneath the surface, and wish fulfillment, and there were, I think it says in Gemara Brachot that there were 24 dream interpreters on the Sanhedrin, right? So imagine, you wanted dream interpreters, you wanted people who could read between the lines of things, people who feel things deeply, and as a result of feeling things deeply, they can act on things in a more profound way. All right, I'm going to go back to my share. So I want to look at what I called in my book on Esther, the destiny moment. And I want to suggest that in all of these stories, we're only going to look at Joseph and Esther. We're not going to look at Daniel, and we can talk about Moses. Moses is sometimes included. Moshe is included in this category in Bible scholarship. He's sort of the Jewish courtier. We're going to look at what each of these characters must undergo in order to be fully powerful. And that is a moment when the watershed moment, when they have to make an identity decision. Who am I really? And how am I going to be out in the world? So in Breshit, we know all these ruses that Yosef puts upon his brothers to test them, but there's a point where Binyamin comes down to Egypt, and he just can't hold it back. V'lo yachol Yosef litapek l'chol hanitzavim alav v'yikra hotziu kol ish me'alai. Right? So Yosef couldn't hold back, right? And I want to think about that hold back. It's such a strong verb, right? To hold something back means it's surging within you. Who you really are is surging within you, and you cannot keep it to yourself. From all of the people around him, and he calls out, and let every person leave from before me. V'lo amad ish ito, b'tvaday Yosef el echav. So it's funny because Ish here is a foreigner. There were other people in the room, even though he threw everyone out, and those were his brothers. So there was not a person who was there when Yosef confessed his identity to his brothers. And you imagine that he tried to live this bifurcated existence where he was a vizier and he had all the trappings of royalty. And then when his Jewish brothers are here, he has to figure out what he wants to do with them. He recognizes them, they don't recognize him. There's a lot of plays on this term of recognition in Hebrew. And now the moment comes, and Yosef tries to make the ultimate compartmentalization. You go into another room and you guys stay here, and then I'm going to tell you who I really am. But once you do that, all of that surge, that identity surge is going to come out. What's going to happen? V'yitein kolo bebechi. He starts crying. And it's even more than crying. It's like he gives his voice over to crying. You know, when there's that crying where you can't breathe, like you've given over your whole voice to the cry. V'yishma'u Mitzrayim. You know who heard? All of Mitzrayim. V'yishma Beit Paro, and Beit Paro heard. And he thought that he could compartmentalize his identity, or he would pay a price for it. And actually, that's not what happens. When he cries and everybody hears him, everyone who he threw out can hear him because his voice is so loud. And it's like the exact opposite of what you thought it would be. If you were trying to keep your identity quiet, you would cry quietly. But he's unable to do that because he's overpowered by his sense of, I'll call it peoplehood in the broadest sense. It's his family, right? It's the reunification of his family, and all of the trauma and all of the dissonance and all the difficulty is overcome, and all of Pharaoh's palace hears that. And they don't punish Yosef for it. Quite the opposite. Yosef gives his family prime real estate in Egypt. They're welcome to come down, and then Pharaoh meets with Jacob. Yosef introduces the two. It's beyond any dream that he could have ever had. And if you look at moments where Jews have achieved some greatness, I mean, look at the Olympics now. Post Olympics, every Jewish newspaper, here are the Jewish Olympians, right? And here are the awards that they got. Why? Because here's the Nobel Prize winner. Here's Isaac Bashevis Singer accepting the Nobel Prize and commenting like, who would have ever thought that I could get here, right? Robert Ullman, when he won the Nobel Prize, I think in chemistry, the first thing he said to his Swedish audience was the Bracha of Shehecheyanu, right? There's got to be a moment where you go, wow, I wish my grandparents, I wish were in Auschwitz could see me now, right? It was just some like big moment, this destiny moment. And for Esther, I think it happens. We tend to think it's when Esther says, when Mordecai tells her, challenges her to join him in this campaign. I think actually happens right after that. She says, Lech kanosa kol hayudim hanimtzeim b'Shushan. In other words, up to now, we've only heard about Mordechai really in Shushan. We heard a little bit about the Jewish wailing, and now Esther says, I have made this commitment to the people, to my people. I recognize what I'm here to do, what is my deep, greatest purpose in this world. So, kanos ekol hayudim. Now, if you haven't paid attention to it before, because it's so easy, we read the Megillah, there's so much to pay attention to, there's so much going on. This, for me, this year, this is Purim 2026. This is the expression I'm thinking about most. Lech kenosa kol Yudim. Gather all the Jews. Just gather them, right? And it was bring them all together. They're dispersed. That's what Haman said about us. We're dispersed. We live everywhere. But what Haman didn't say is when there's a time of crisis, we are all showing up. We are all gathering. B'Shushan, v'tzumo alai, and fast alai, fast for me. What is she saying? My identity is tied up in their identity. They are part of me. I am part of them. I may have never really recognized that about myself. Look at how many people exhibited rituals of Judaism or engaged in Jewish prayer during post October 7th. People who never thought of themselves that way. And I meet people like this, I don't know, all the time. Someone comes to a class, someone sends me an email. I just started learning about Judaism. I found on college campus, I felt so alienated. I walked into the Hillel for the first time. Right? There's this process that begins with Lech, Knosa Kol Yudim. Gather the Jews together. Gather them together. And Tzumo Alai, sacrifice something for something bigger or different than yourself. V'al tachlu, v'al tishtu shosha yamim, laila v'yom, gam ani v'narotai atzum kain. I'm not asking you to do something that I'm not willing to do. We're all going to do this together. Uv'chein avo el hamelech asher lo kadat v'chasher avadati. So we tend to, because also we read this in a slightly different trop, we emphasize kasher avadati. Esther was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. But what we don't say is everything else in this verse, which is Esther says, once I know that you are all fasting, alai, with me, upon me, as part of me, then achein uvachein avo el hamelech. Then I can go. Then I can go. What gives me strength is knowing that I have all of these people behind me. And because all of these people are behind me, my life has taken on a whole new dimension and color and meaning and purpose. I just want to close with something that I read in a wonderful book by Natan Sharansky, Defending Identity, Its Indispensable Role in Defending Identity, in Defending Democracy, rather. This came out also in 2008. So this was a time a lot of people were writing about Jewish identity and peoplehood. And he says something that I think is very profound because a lot of Jews struggle with the issue of particularism versus universalism, taking care of the world as opposed to taking care of ourselves. But of course, if we don't take care of ourselves, who will take care of us? And Natan says, I discovered that only by embracing who I am, by going back to the shtetl, by connecting to my own people, by building my own particular identity, could I also stand with others. Far from negating freedom, identity gave me both inner freedom and the strength to help others. When Jews abandon identity in the pursuit of universal freedom, they end up with neither. Yet when they embrace identity in the name of freedom, as Soviet Jews did in the 1970s, they end up securing both. When freedom and identity are separated, both are weakened. Sharansky is saying something really so profound, which is when you deepen your own identity, your sense of universalism also grows. People think that when you become particularistic, you become parochial, you become engaged with your own people, that you will close yourself off from the world. And he says, no, the deeper that you identify, the deeper you make a claim and a stake in Judaism, the more you will understand the pain and the suffering and the advocacy that the world needs. That's where his humanitarianism grew out of his particularism. And I think that's actually such a beautiful message, especially now, especially reading the Megillah this year. I always say we read these texts again because we're different people, even though the texts stay the same, and then we see different things in the text than we saw before. And this year, when I read the Megillah, I'm going to think about this image of Lech Kenosa Kol Hayudim. What am I doing? What are any of us doing to gather Jews together and to say, whatever happens to one of us happens to us all? And maybe that's the ultimate definition of peoplehood, of a family with a purpose, an extended family with a purpose. I don't know who you are, but I will stake everything on your freedom. I will do whatever I can do to help you get out of a tunnel, to help you celebrate Seder with your family, to help you read this book of Esther. And I wonder how hostages who are released and alive now, I wonder how they read this book. I wonder what it means for them that's different than it did before October 7th. It certainly means something different for me, something that's much richer, much more profound, and also that obligates me in a way that I didn't feel obligated before. And I say that because the book of Esther, although it has this somber, difficult beginning, the book of Esther is the end of Esther. Kanos et kol hayudim. Esther mandates that all of us gather, but all of us gather then to celebrate rather than to mourn or to strategize. So that's that kind of celebration. I think we all know what that celebration is. We enjoy Purim and it's a lot of fun, but it has very, very deep and profound implications for our sense of identity and our sense of family. Questions, thoughts? We're at 9 p.m.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. It's so good to see you. Wishing all of you a beautiful, meaningful Purim, and I look forward to seeing you at our pre-Pesach. We'll let you know about that next week. Happy Purim, everyone.